Now, today we're going into talk about one of our favorites, Charles Manson. And joining us again is author Dary Matera. Thanks very much for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Alan.
Now, Charles Manson, you've written a book, The Life Behind Bars, Taming the Beast.
Taming the Beast, Charles Manson's Life Behind Bars. Basically takes up where Helter Skelter ends. Where the last chapter of Helter Skelter is the first chapter of Taming the Beast. And It's so segued that Vincent Bugliosi, who wrote Helter Skelter, he's endorsing my book right on the cover.
Okay, so what made you go to doing this book? I know you kind of go all over the place with different books, but what made you pick up Charles Manson?
Well, similar with the John Dillinger book I wrote is someone had a manuscript, a non-professional writer. It was actually a counselor in a prison administrator and counselor had a manuscript about all the famous prisoners that he encountered in his life in California, San Quentin, Sing Sing, Vacaville, the mental institution where Manson was, and all those prisons. So he had this manuscript that needed polishing. He went to my agent, and they told me to work with this guy and knock out a book. And then the publisher decided to throw out Sirhan, and all these serial killers, the Green Mountain Killer and this and the Black Panthers, and they wanted a book totally about Charles Manson. So they just kind of changed the scope of his manuscript because Manson was the big star, and they said, no, let's go all Charlie. And being a writer, I kind of got the other people back because they were Manson's friends and associates and cellmates in prison. So when Sirhan, who killed Kennedy, or some other guy did a riot or something, I kind of weaved Charlie in there as being part of it, so I could get that story back in the book. Little writing author tips.
Yeah. So this was kind of taken from, I guess, a prison counselor.
Yeah, it was a prison counselor. Very interesting story. He was He was an Air Force pilot who became a seminary student. He went 5 years to become a priest and then couldn't deal with celibacy. So he became a counselor in prisons. That was kind of his priestly duties while he could still have sex and a family and wouldn't have to pretend to be celibate. So that's he was the guy who, and his name was Edward George. He's like almost 90 years old now, and he was Manson's personal counselor and later his friend for the last 30 years.
That must have been interesting. I mean, how did you find his stories as a counselor? Like, wasn't it? Wouldn't it be kind of scary to be in a situation where you're supposed to be counseling someone like Charles Manson?
Oh yeah, it's very scary. In fact, the book opens with Ed's first encounter, and Ed, like I said, he was a priest who you're used to bad people. He was an Air Force pilot, so he's in the military. He was a big, tall man, so he wasn't any shrinking violent. But the first scenes of encountering Charles Manson for the first time, and he wasn't even warned. I mean, he's just walking down the corridor in one of these dark prison cells after sundown, and he accidentally next thing you know, he's got this little troll monster playing head games with him. And it wasn't in, 5 minutes in, he said, oh crap, that's Charles Manson. And that's kind of how the book opens. And then it starts this long relationship with the two of them, because Manson's a really fascinating guy. He wasn't a killer. If he would have channeled his abilities in other areas, he would have been famous maybe as a rock star or a cult leader or a preacher or something, because he was a mesmerizing character. That's what started. So, and it almost destroyed Ed George, the priest and counselor. I mean, Manson got in his head, and he had his own wild period where he left his wife and family and bought a motorcycle and wanted to live the sex, drugs, and rock and roll and Charles Manson life. So it's a fascinating story. It's kind of similar to the original. Jodie Foster did that movie with Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
The original Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs, yeah.
The book is it's a true life version of Silence of the Lambs. Imagine Charles Manson as Hannibal Lecter and this prison priest as Jodie Foster, and you can see their relationship develop over the years.
Yeah, I was going to say that was what was coming to my mind as a counselor. That must have been you're up against Charles Manson. Very smart, and he's got a lot of charisma. I'm sure he could manipulate quite well. So,
well, their relationship was such. The book is Taming the Beast, and their relationship was such that he would free Charles. He wouldn't even be in chains or tied down or none of that. He'd just sit in his office and shoot the breeze. They got to be that close. And then when other visitors would come in, like they'd do a media interview. They used to allow the media to interview prisoners back then. Because of Manson, they stopped it. But when they do a media interview, then Charlie would go crazy and act out and attack the reporters. And then Ed said, "Oh, come on, Charlie, why'd you have to do that?" And the next day, Charlie's sitting in the room with him, free as a bird, never attacked Ed.
Yeah, what was it about Charlie, like this, because this is a big question here. Now, why would George, the counselor, actually be friends with him now? Like that you're going to have to explain. I don't quite understand that, because when it's your job and you're the counselor and you're doing your job, to now and being friends.
Yeah. All right, well, we haven't even, for people who may be younger, we haven't established who Charles Manson is. So briefly, he was a 60s hippies cult leader who created a peace and love and environmentalist type hippie cult family, the most famous one in history. That was going pretty well for a while. And then the drugs and Manson's prison history got in, and they went on these little night murder sprees, and they had the misfortune of killing some celebrities, which you don't do in America. And they killed Sharon Tate. Roman Polanski was a famous director. Sharon Tate was his wife, and some hairdressers, and she had a party. They were trying to get Doris Day's son, because Charlie was mad at him, and it was the house, but the house had been changed. So they did this 2-night murder spree, ended up killing 9 people, if you include Sharon Tate's baby, and then that became history. It just terrified Hollywood and the whole world it practically ended the hippie generation, because everybody in America thought raving, lunatic, drug addict hippies were going to come in the middle of the night and kill everybody. So that was Manson's legacy that's never died. Now, the original question, and your question was Ed, this counselor, why he would maintain a relationship. You know, relationships happen under any circumstance. Why do women beg horrible serial killer prisoners to marry them? You see that all the time. Some famous serial killer is getting love letters from fans and crazies and women who read their story, saw their picture, liked them. You form these relationships. And Ed just formed this relationship with Charlie over the course of 10, 15 years of being together and being responsible for him. That's what when he was hired, they said, all right, we got this lunatic Charles Manson. He's your problem. You take care of him. And you keep it down. And Ed got to know the family members. He got to know the women who were still free. He got to know Squeaky Fromm. Squeaky would call him all the time. He just almost became a family member. He was like one of the gang. So the relationship would maintain. Now, when the book came out, Charlie was mad and yelled at Ed, and they kind of broke up. But after that, Ed likes to stay in touch and see how he's doing. Guy's living forever. He just won't die. He's in his 70s now, and everybody's still afraid of him. But
and isn't he? Speaking of that, isn't he getting married to some 25-year-old now?
He had. Just like I said, you say, why did Ed maintain a friendship with him? This prison counselor. He's a priest. Ed's basically a priest. A priest is going to maintain a relationship with anybody they're trying to save. That's their calling. But prisoners have groupies. Charles Manson has this woman trying to marry him, and she's very beautiful. She's not some desperation. She's just some gothy kind of woman, I think her name's Star or something. She's some gothy, dark, Metalopolis type woman who wants to be Mrs. Charles Manson. She's in her 20s, and she was ready to marry him, and they got a license, but he let it expire. She must have ticked him off somehow, or Squeaky probably cried, or Sandra Good, who's been free all these years, one of his main minion women, she probably got to him, and they all cried that he was marrying this little harpy, so they were upset. So he didn't go through with the marriage.
Well, that's just it's crazy anyway. I think that there's a difference with Ed, because at least he had many years of being with Charlie, so you can develop something. But this girl had never met him. It's just all online or over.
Well, Charles Manson, for the past 30 years, has gotten more mail than almost all the other prisoners in the whole entire prison system combined. He still gets bags of it, and Ed George, the guy I wrote the book with, his responsibility was to screen Charles' mail, Manson's mail. So every psycho, crazy, marry me, I love you, I will kill for you, Charlie, and there's a lot of letters, I will kill for you, just say who. And Ed was reading them all. That was his job, bags of them. Just bags and bags and bags of mail from teenage kids who were like that whole cult idea and environment. You see it today. It's basically Bernie Sanders. The people who are going for Bernie Sanders today are all people who would like Charles Manson. Write Bernie one letter, the guy who ran for president, and then they write Charles a letter. Well, Bernie didn't listen to us. Can you help me, Charlie?
Yeah.
And he gets more mail than anybody. It's crazy. Yeah, people are crazy.
It's crazy, and I see that he has something like 70,000 followers on Facebook or something. That's crazy. He's
got pages and 70,000. I guess Twitter. I guess Charlie would be tweeting if he was in the. Can you imagine if Charlie got a woman to try to kill the president for him, and she would have succeeded if someone taught her how to use a gun right, because she didn't chamber a bullet. She got right in President Gerald Ford's face and clicked the gun. She would have Charles Manson would have been responsible for killing a president, but she didn't chamber a bullet, and it just hit an empty chamber.
Well, that's
squeaky from. That's squeaky from.
It's impressive. It's kind of scary. Why does he capture so many people, mesmerize them, and have them do such big things? Not just like a little go into a store and steal something. We're talking about killing someone like a president, or how can he do that?
He had great hair.
Yeah. Well,
great hair. He looked cool. He had great hair, and he looked like Jim Morrison of The Doors, and he was cool, and he was dark, and he was scary. He's the epitome of every teenage girl who likes the bad boys. You know, he's the Fonz times 100. So he was the epitome. Plus, he spoke very well, and he was mesmerizing, and he knew how to use drugs. You know, you get a young teenage girl high, and you start talking to her about uplifting herself and extending beyond who she is, and don't listen to your old fogey parents, and that can work, especially if she's high on pot or LSD or something. And you're Charles Manson with your flowing locks and twinkly eyes, and this was very mesmerizing. I mean, he had women who do anything for him, have sex with anybody just to please him, and they were beautiful women. A lot of people are being introduced with this new show Aquarius on NBC,
right,
with David Duchovny from the X-Files, and they're seeing how these women were drawn to Charles and how he created this cult of young women and this whole new way of living in the world. And he got women from all parts of society, rich girls, middle class, street kids. He took them all.
So let's maybe explain how it started. Like, what did Charles Manson do? Like, how did he get the family, as we call it? What was the process there?
Well, the surprising thing about Manson, there's always, I do a show called Facts or Fiction on the military channel. It's now American Heroes channel, where you go back and you look at legends and you see the truth. And the truth about Manson, he's associated with the hippie generation in the 1960s and the free loves. But he was older, and he was actually from the 50s. Manson was more of the Fonz than he was Jim Morrison and those guys. So, and he was in prison most of his life. He had a bad childhood, and he was in reform schools, and he was indoctrinated with the whole prison lifestyle. So when he got out of prison, he was a pimp, armed robbery. So when he got out of prison in the 60s, in 1967, he was out of sync and out of touch. And he got out of prison, and the world had changed. And he was this older guy with a Fonzie hairdo, and everybody was in San Francisco and Haight-Ashbury, and it was love children, and the new hippies were taking over. And he saw that, and not only did it work for him in what he wanted to do, back then being homeless was cool. If you were a homeless guy in San Francisco, that was almost cool. You could take a girl out and brag that you were homeless, and you could get somewhere with her. Imagine today going on a date and telling your date that you're homeless.
Yeah.
But in the 60s, that was cool. Girls would say, oh, that's so cool. You've shed the bonds of an apartment. You shed the bonds of a prison house. You're free. You sleep in parks and eat out of garbage cans. Yay. And they go to bed with them. That was your rap. Being homeless could be your rap back then. And that was perfect for Charlie, because here he was out of prison, not a dime, didn't know what he was doing, out of touch, out of time. Time had passed him by, but having spent his whole life in prison, he could adapt to situations, and he adapted really quickly. So like everybody did when the Beatles came out, the next day everybody pushed their hair down instead of up. And within a month, everybody had long Beatle hair. Well, Charlie let his hair grow and walked around and saw the homeless escapees and young kids in San Francisco looking for something, and he used that and built his family.
That's amazing. And so where did they all stay? Like what was his where did he live?
He moved around from place to place. He would go anywhere from tents out in the desert to conning friends and people. The thing of Charlie's inroads is Charlie, before the Helter Skelter murders, he interacted with everybody from rich guys wanting to be cool. He's celebrities. He was in Hollywood with people like Cary Grant. He was bisexual, so he could weasel his way with any Hollywood star, closeted gay guys, and he brought all these girls. He traveled in a bus. He bought a bus and had his family, and if you had a party and you wanted to have the best party in Hollywood, you got Charles Manson, because he'd bring 20 girls who would all get naked in the first 5 minutes. And how's that for spicing up your boring little party? Even celebrities who were working hard, like Steve McQueen and those guys, couldn't throw a party like that. And Charlie could, and they knew that. So he kind of got around, hey, this guy has a busload of women. They're all teenagers, and they'll all get naked and crazy. Let's have a party. And that was his reputation. And he was at every level of society with this busload of women. He only had like 3 or 4 or 5 guys in his group, and then the rest were maybe 10 to 15 to 20 women. And that's alluring if you want to throw a party. He's the go-to guy.
Yeah,
and then he'd move in. The problem with Charlie is they'd move in. They did that with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. Threw a party. Charlie brought his 15 girls. They all moved into the house. Dennis Wilson couldn't get them out of there. It's like 2 weeks later, and the party's still going on.
Yeah. You just can't get rid of the party. You're paying for it.
Can't get rid of Manson. This is his new home, because Manson had nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
And then sometimes there'd be an old guy out in Spawn Ranch, where the family spent most of their time, in one of the California deserts. It was an old guy in his 60s or something, an old rancher, and Charlie just put one of the girls on him to take care of him, all his needs, and he let him live out on the ranch. It was pretty easy. Pretty brilliant plan.
Wow, he sort of...
Women. I mean, he was a pimp. That's how he came up, so he knew the power of women over men and how to manipulate men through women.
Did he have
or gay men gay man through himself.
So did he have a bad childhood or something? Like, where did he grow up?
Yeah, Charlie, he grew up in Mid-South. Drawing a blank, but kind of West Virginia or Memphis or one of those there. Not Memphis, that's Elvis, but yeah, Mid-South rural area. Yeah, he had his mom had some alcohol problems. He had a bad stepdad who abused him. His dad even made him wear a dress to school one day because he was whining like a little baby, so the stepdad made him wear a dress to school. You can imagine how humiliating that was. And he quickly ran away and did some things and ended up in reform schools. And he was a little guy. Charlie was only 5'3". He was a little guy. He was a nice-looking guy. So you imagine a kid like that in a reform school. I mean, he was being raped and assaulted by the guards, by fellow prisoners, by the older kids. Yeah, he had a miserable childhood. That's what scarred him. That's what ruined him. All the talents he had and the leadership abilities he had was ruined by that horrible childhood and all those southern West Virginia type reform schools.
Well, that would have been awful, because that would have been in the 50s probably. So to go to school in a dress in the 50s?
Yeah.
That would have been
Your dad's teaching you a lesson. The lesson is how to make you a serial killer in your 30s. That was the lesson, that stepdad. But, the proverbial horrible stepdad. Well, if he was a woman, the stepdad probably would have raped him.
Yeah, I mean, that's... now, were the parents alive after all this came out and Manson was the serial killer and movies and books and that?
The mother or the stepdad?
Yeah, how did it...
Oh, well, they headed for the hills. They were around. I don't think anybody ever found them. And the mother died pretty young because she had substance abuse issues. And so there's very little about them. More intriguing is all the children he's supposed to have had. Charlie had 2-3 years of sex every night with all these young, fertile teenage girls, and they were popping babies in the Klan a lot. There are Charles Manson Jr.'s out there, but nobody wants to go by that name. No. Marilyn Manson did, the singer, unless you're going to be a gothy type Slayer, dark rock and roll star. You don't want to be known as Charles Manson Jr., so they're all hiding the fact. Well, no one's ever been able to track one down. Once in a while you see a possibility, but they're staying undercover, and you can see why. Who wants to be Charles Manson? You don't put that on your resume.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be, that's, what are you going to use that for? That would, now this...
Go to Hollywood and become a rock star. That's what you use it for. Or do talk radio.
Yeah, there you go.
So you get some gigs on... It doesn't pay well to be a guest on talk radio, but you can do TV and radio interviews.
Get your own show.
Yeah. No one's got the cojones to do that.
No. Well, now...
You could write a book. Maybe, but they didn't know that much. What could you write if Manson was in prison when you were a baby? You don't have the story to tell.
And now this show, Aquarius, do you think they're doing a good job so far? Have you watched it?
Yeah, I've seen every episode of Aquarius. I've really enjoyed it. And from knowing this Manson story inside out and everything, I mean, I can watch it with a real discerning eye. I can tell what's true, what's kind of fiction, what's fantasy. The show delves off into other, kind of like what I did in the book. It touches upon what, they probably steal in my book, because there's touching upon what else is going on at the time, and serial killers, because it's about the cop who was kind of hunting Manson and would later become involved in Helter Skelter afterwards. So it deals with what else is going on, what other crimes. But the show, it's taking a lot of the truth in the story. It shows how he built his family, how these women were seduced, what their thought process was, and I've really enjoyed it. I think the show is very good.
Yeah.
I see on the internet, I mean, people don't know the whole story. After one of the shows, which showed Manson at the Tate house, right, where the murders happened, and they had Manson there, and everybody's saying, Manson was never there, what BS, what BS. Well, no, he was there.
Yeah.
He went afterward and cleaned up the scene. So people don't know that. People forget. They say, he never killed anybody, he didn't commit any murders. Yeah, he went to the house after the slaughter and tried to clean up the scene so the CSI guys wouldn't catch his gang.
Right.
So he was there, and then the Tate-LaBianca, he went in first the next day and tied him up, then told his gang to go in there and slaughter him. So he was at both houses.
Yeah.
So all the people on the internet who say he wasn't, you're all wrong. The TV show is right.
Yeah. Well, you get that with people. Most
on
of
the
them,
internet.
Yeah, on the internet. Most of them weren't even alive when this happened. So
Right.
So you think the series is following a pretty good format?
Yeah, it's very good. It's good timeline. It's mixing things in. It's doing what it has to. But I've really thought it's and I'm the toughest critic because I know the story inside out, and I'm seeing what they're doing, where they're getting material, where they're taking things from my book, where they're doing things legitimately and right, and even at the expense of, like we just talked about, people saying, no, that never happened. Charlie never did that. Yeah, he did that. So they're weaving a good story in. And the guy playing him is very good. The guy playing young Manson is doing a very good job.
Yeah.
And the girls, they're focusing on the women a lot, the young girls, especially one, I guess, that they're making squeaky. They call her Cherry. Very beautiful actress, too.
There's all that
she's
stuff.
Doing a really good job.
Well,
she should get an Emmy.
Well, lately, too, all the, some of them have been trying to get out of prison, right? That keeps coming up on the news. I think one of them is getting out, hey?
Well, they always say you think one may get out. Here's the deal with the Manson family. As horrific as the crime was, they are way beyond their expiration dates for prison sentences. They're the longest people in the whole prison system who have been in prison. People have done horrific crimes, and they get out in 10, 15 years or less. The Manson family members have been in prison for almost 50 years, a half century. All these teenage girls who are now in their 70s, they still won't let them out because of the publicity. And our prison system is not based on who committed the most publicized crime. The rehabilitation and the parole system should not take that into consideration. But, of course, everything is celebrity and media in America. Even now it's worse. So those poor people can't get out. And it's hard to say poor people, but, if you're an 18-year-old and you're on LSD and you're wandering around a house and you don't even know if what you're seeing is real, and you're now a 72-year-old woman and society is still afraid of you, it's harsh. And there 10,000, 100,000 examples of people who committed horrendous crimes that got out, and 1/3 of the time is the Manson family. And they don't let any of them out. They let Susan Atkins out for a day before she died. She was one of the worst, though. She was the one who cut up the baby, Sharon Tate's baby, but she was horrible. She wasn't going to get out, but she died of cancer. And some of the others, they kind of work for them and say, look, she's done her time. She was just a kid. But they won't let any of them out.
Well, Leslie Van Houten has been granted parole. She was one of them. She was she was approved for parole. She was the only person that can stop her release now is Governor of California, Dary Brown. Please sign this petition.
He does, and he has in the past.
Yeah.
I think Leslie's been granted parole in the past, and some of the others were granted parole, and Jerry Brown stops it.
Yeah.
He stopped the parole because that was his era. I think he might have been governor when it happened. He's the worst governor to be in office for the poor Manson girls because he was around back in that era. Jerry Brown was kind of the first hippie governor, and he's still mad about that. I mean, his girlfriend was a rock star. Who did he go with? Linda Ronstadt, I think?
Linda Ronstadt, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. So Jerry Brown has a long memory. So Leslie's been granted parole before, and it's been overruled.
The sister of Sharon Tate has got this petition out, and she needs 6,900 more to get 150,000
to get her to stay in.
To get her to stay in. I wanted to give it to Jerry Brown, and then he. Well, if he signs it, I guess.
Yeah, Ed George, the guy who wrote the book about the prison counselor, he's always been supportive of Leslie. He's been saying since the book came out that she should be paroled, that she was young and didn't know what she was doing. So he's supportive of letting her out. But I bet they don't. You know, I bet they don't let her out. People would be terrified. They think they're old people. I always say, what do they think? That even if you let Charles Manson out and you let them out, these old, they're going to bring their walkers to Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie's house, and they're going to get a little rubber knife from McDonald's, a plastic knife, and cut them up. They're still going to do that. That's the one side of the story. The other side is all the young people, teenagers, writing Manson letters and wanting to kill for him. So he could form a new family. But the old family ain't going to do anything. Yeah. They're just going to go to Walmart in their walkers.
Yeah. go on Senior's Day. And
yeah.
Yeah.
They're eating the Blue Plate special. They're not going to do a midnight murder anymore because they go to bed at 7 now.
Yeah.
I mean, these women are old. You look at their pictures, they're old women.
Yeah,
they're not these scary girls with shaved heads and swastikas cut in their forehead like they were in the 60s during that trial, which was the trial of the world century, with all these bald-headed young girls chanting on the pavement outside the courtroom, worshiping Charlie, and swastikas carved in their head. It was a crazy, crazy time.
Well, and I think that might be the reason why someone like Governor Brown or some of the people that were around then, because at first when they were being tried, the death penalty was there, and it got taken away before he was convicted, so he never had to face death.
Right. Yeah, it goes back and forth in California with politics. So Manson was given the death penalty. Even though he never killed anybody, he still got the death penalty. And then it was rescinded, so he's been off the hook. And they bounce around in the prisons. But one of the main sections of my book, Tame and the Beast, was Manson's time at the Vacaville mental facility. Somehow he weaseled his way. If you think of the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Manson got himself in a mental hospital with lax security, and he had to run of the place. He was even given speeches in the chapel, and he almost escaped. He had a little hippie nest up in the attic where he was reliving the 60s and planning his escape. There was all kind of things going on in Vacaville Criminal Mental Institution. Wow. It was a perfect place for Manson to be.
Yeah.
An insane asylum, giving him rule. He's like what they say, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Well, the Manson was king there, and he had a long run there.
Wow. What do you think, what was the most, I don't want to say surprising, but what was the thing that sticks out the most when you were talking with Edward about his time and putting together the book? Was there any surprises for you?
Well, the thing that stuck out the most was how close on the edge Manson could have came to being Jim Morrison or another rock star or someone positive in history. How close he came to being a cult leader, a positive force, almost like Gandhi. I mean, without the prison influence, the power he had over recruiting people and getting them to do his will was so strong that he could have gone down in history as a good figure, a Gandhi, Timothy Leary, who created the LSD and the cult movement. I mean, or he could have maybe been a politician. He could have been something famous, or just he was on track. He was a good musician. He could write songs, so he was on track of being a Jim Morrison type rock star. And that's what surprised me the most. Just, you thought it was just a bunch of knuckleheads and disfranchised people, and he was evil to the core, and he really wasn't. And also the Helter Skelter, the whole thing about a second surprise was the story of Helter Skelter was that Manson did the killing so he could create a black-white war. And that came out of Manson's prison life, because in prison there's huge segregation, and there's so many African-American prisoners, they dominate the prison system. Manson was always trying to survive as a little white guy in black-dominated prisons, so he had this idea that the blacks were going to take over the world. But that was just one of the things he said once in a while on drugs. He had a lot of thoughts. And it's very doubtful that the murders were based on that. That just grabbed Vincent Bugliosi and enabled him to prosecute the case. The reality of the murders is that one of the guys, there were very few guys in the group, and there was one guy who was a really good-looking guy, and all the girls liked him, and he got busted in a drug deal unrelated to the family. And in the drug deal, they wrote, he killed a drug dealer and then was on LSD, so he wrote some crap on the wall in the guy's blood. And all the Manson girls thought, hey, let's do another crime right on the wall in blood. Our guy's in prison. The cops will see that it's not him and let him go. And that was basically the motive for the helter-skelter killings. They wanted to free one of their guy members all the girls liked.
Do you think he's responsible for any deaths since he's been in prison?
Oh, yeah. That's the story that nobody wants anybody to know. I mean, the helter-skelter murders were 8 people. Manson has been responsible for at least 30 more deaths since he's been in prison by just giving orders and sending out messages and getting messages out and killing old enemies and killing people he still doesn't like. So the murders have gone on. You'll just never hear about it because the American government is not going to let people know that imprisoning someone doesn't end their reign of horror. And if anybody challenges that, you just have to think, hey, he almost got the president killed while he was in jail. So he would have accomplished killing the President of the United States from his jail cell. And the message was sent by, and Ed George was right there, because Squeaky Fromm, who tried to shoot Gerald Ford, kept calling Ed, begging to be able to talk to Charlie. And he finally broke Ed on Christmas. He let Squeaky talk to Charlie, and Charlie gave her some code to go do it. And, Ed was furious, and he got the code, and a few days later, next thing you know, there's Squeaky in her hood firing a gun in President Ford's face. So, yeah, Manson, the murders continue. You have an army of young kids wanting to kill for you. It's pretty easy to have people killed. The problem is he's been in jail so long, he's running out of people to kill. Mostly prisoners that in jail, dissed him, and then they get out, and then Manson has them whacked.
Did you get any sort of feeling of what kind of religion he followed, or he was sort of believe in, or how was he spiritually?
No, Manson he's a spiritual person, but he always put himself up as the God. That was his thing. I mean, he claimed to be Jesus. He claimed to be a God figure himself. He used what he knew about religion to morph himself into the God role. It was even beyond a prophet, because Manson wasn't going to be beholden to anyone, so he kind of made himself out to be a God figure. He often, in the LSD haze, would tell people he was Jesus, come back to life, and he weaved all that he learned. I mean, he spent a lot of time in prison, so he probably read the Bible back to back, read the Koran, read every religious book there is, and he kind of weaved it into his own personal philosophy so he could be this cult leader. But as far as his own beliefs, I don't think he had anything beyond himself, putting himself up as the God.
Do you think, and so the old story, do you think he'll ever get out himself?
No, Manson says that he's like Frankenstein. If they let him out, the whole world will freak out and they'll hunt him down, that he's safer in prison, that the villagers with the torches will literally appeal anywhere he's let out. I mean, what if Manson comes and moves next to you, buys a house? What's your neighborhood going to do? Freak out. Charles Manson just moved into the neighborhood. So he freely admits that he's Frankenstein, and he can't be let loose in society. His image and his reputation has gone beyond reality, and no matter how old he gets, nobody wants to Charles Manson in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
So he's kind of lost hope. I mean, he doesn't even show up at half his parole hearings. And the ones he shows up, he manages to ink the swastika scar on his forehead, which doesn't play very well with the parole board when you're showing up with your newly inked swastika on your forehead.
What was the deal with the swastika? Why would they wear the swastika? Like, what was the concept behind that?
Mostly shock value, showing your anti-society. In the 60s, World War II wasn't that far away. It had only been about 25 years since the end of the war. So what could an American or a rebellious person do to shock society the most was to wear a swastika. Plus, also, there was that race war thing where Bugliosi claimed that Manson was trying to start a race war between the blacks and the whites. And for Manson to wear a swastika and then have his girls wear a swastika, it was like a signal for the blacks to rise up and the Panthers and start the race war, because look what's happening. The anti-black, anti-Semitic Nazi philosophy born out of prisons where the racial divides are really strong and violent, was coming. So that was part of all that plan. With the shock society. Manson was like to shock the world.
Was there ever any reason for him? Like I guess the main concept is, why was he having these people like Sharon Tate and the LaBianca family killed?
The mystery of why that house, why... Well, you can see that in the TV show Aquarius. Right. They're going to build up to... They're going to follow along one of the theories. There's been many theories. One of the theories is just that he went to the house of Terry Melcher's house, which is Doris Day's son, who was a record producer that the Beach Boys introduced Manson to. And Manson was supposed to be a rock star, and Terry Melcher kind of blew him off or didn't think he was good enough, and then Manson wanted revenge. That's the story, and I think that's where Aquarius is going. So they went to Melcher's house, but Melcher was no longer there, fortunately for Melcher. His girlfriend at the time was Candice Bergen, too, who was a famous actress from her TV show she did.
Murphy's
I can't remember it. But Murphy Brown, yeah.
Murphy Brown.
Murphy Brown actress. You see, Manson was all over Hollywood. Murphy Brown was Terry Melcher's girlfriend at the time of Helter Skelter when they killed him. So that was one theory. One theory was that he had redwood decks, and they were all environmentalists, and they were enraged that they cut down the redwoods and made the decks in the house. The other was Manson was just jealous because Meltzer blew him off. And a third theory was that Manson just knew the house from being there and picked it randomly and had no idea who was going to be there at the time. And it turned out there was a little party going on. And that was just random, that he had Abigail Folger, the Folger coffee heiress, happened to just be there. Manson had nothing against her. Jay Sebring was there. He was a Hollywood hairdresser. Manson had nothing personal against them. Or even Sharon Tate or Roman Polanski. He really had nothing personal against them. It was just a house he knew that was kind of secluded and could figure it out. They even killed the guy living in the guest house who could have been a Manson follower. He was just a young kid living in the guest house and a friend of the young kids who came to visit him. Just happened to be in the parking lot scoring some pot with his buddy who lived in the guest house. I think they killed the buddy, not the guy in the guest house. They killed the buddy who was in the parking lot, which is really a sad story. Poor kid. Talk about being in the proverbial wrong place at the wrong time. Imagine you go to your buddy's house. Remember O.J. Simpson? He had that blonde guy living in his house, Caitlin.
Yeah. That's right, yeah.
Yeah. This was the typical Hollywood breed of Caitlin. These rich people always had a Caitlin type living in their guest house. And that was the same thing. So the Manson family killed the kid coming to visit Caitlin. So there's no real rhyme or reason to it. Manson, they got a crazy plot. They wanted to free their buddy who was in jail, so they randomly picked a house and committed the murders. It was all about creating the scene, not who they murdered. It was about how the murders were done and what was written in blood on the walls and how they could shock the world into this supposed black-white war, which would be a side effect, I guess, to getting their buddy out of prison.
Yeah. And was there a reason he used the helter-skelter music? Did he believe that was telling him something or something? Wasn't it?
That was another theory that you think of these wild theories, and then you got to think of the drug culture at the time, and they were doing a lot of LSD and a lot of real heavy marijuana and hallucinogenic drugs. So if you're listening to Beatle music and the White Album on LSD, you could be getting all kind of signals coming from that music. You're thinking Helter Skelter, which Paul McCartney, of all people, he was not known for the deepest lyrics. If it was John Lennon, you might say, yeah, he was sending Manson a message. But Paul McCartney? It was just about a ride at a fair, like a roller coaster, Helter Skelter in England. But Manson somehow thought it was going to create a war between the blacks and the whites on LSD haze, and he went off on that tangent. But it was mostly the drugs that were just frying their brain and making them hallucinate, read all this into that. It was the Beatles' White Album, which is a very good album.
Yeah.
And the Beatles had some weird songs because they were doing drugs too.
Yeah.
That was the Beatles' LSD album. So they were doing drugs and songs like Revolution Number 9, and they were recording songs that if you played them backwards, it had messages in the songs. Yeah. So with Manson playing things backward, anybody who lived during that time, everybody was trying to figure out how to play Revolution Number 9 backwards to find out that Paul McCartney was dead.
Yeah, Paul is dead.
To say Paul is dead. Remember all that stuff?
Oh, yeah.
So Manson took it, of course, 100 steps farther and saw that the Beatles were telling him to go kill B-grade celebrities in coffee heiresses and some nonsense like that.
The original movie and book, Helter Skelter, do you think it's pretty accurate?
Yeah, it was a good job. Bugliosi, who I know, he and I actually were supposed to do a book on John Kennedy assassination together. He's a slow and exacting kind of studious attorney type writer, and I'm a rip-roaring, let-it-fly writer. So the publishers wanted to get us together to write the Kennedy book. So I know Bugliosi. He endorsed my book, Taming the Beast, and yeah, he did a good job. His theory of the Black-White War, he went with that because he had to as a prosecutor. But yeah, he did a really good job. And that original miniseries was just riveting. I think they've redone it a few times. The second ones weren't as good, but the one that was shortly thereafter based on Helter Skelter was very, very good. And a lot of, as I did in the book, all you had to do is use Manson transcripts if you wanted some riveting thing, because he got up in court and gave a riveting speech about youth of the day and why he took those kids in and how their parents abandoned them and that he didn't create the family, their parents did. It's a pretty riveting speech. It's in the book. You can find it on the internet. And it was used in the movie almost word for word on the witness stand. So, yeah, Bugliosi did a good job with that.
So you think...
And the series Aquarius is doing a good job. You haven't seen a soliloquy. He hasn't given one of his... It's TV, and they're keeping it short.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen him give one of those crazy Manson soliloquies yet that he was known for.
Yeah.
It might be coming.
Yeah, it might be. You don't know, what they're going to do.
Where they're going to go with that show, yeah, because they show segments of the murders at the beginning of every episode. Then they go back 6 months before, 9 months before, and then the next episode they show more of the horror, and then they go back.
Yeah. So do you think Manson will just keep on going? What do you think's going to happen in the future? Do you think he's just going to
keep on going? What do you mean, keep on going?
Well, you know what I mean, like this whole, with the new series and books, it continues. Do you have a theory on...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, do you have a theory on why...
His fame will last forever. I mean, there'll be new movies. They'll eventually do my book as a movie to update what he's been doing in prison and scare everybody with all the new murders. And the TV show is playing every week. So you got all these young people now who are watching this TV show and thinking, I want to live like that. I want to live in a cult. I want to have all those women.
Yeah.
So they're watching that. It's a new recruitment tool. He's probably bigger than he's ever been.
Do you think there's a reason why certain people, certain serial killers, or people like him stick out and we keep on focusing on rather than others?
Oh, yeah. It's all about... just timing, name recognition, what's going on at the time, and celebrity, mostly about celebrity. Manson killed Hollywood celebrities. You can't get more publicity than that. You could kill 20 random people in a mall, and it's not going to get you the fame as if you kill Lindsay Lohan or Britney Spears or someone of that nature. Not that I'm endorsing that. I'm just saying, if you pull that, and again, Manson did it randomly. He just lucked out. I mean, Sharon Tate was just a B-level actress. Her husband, who wasn't even there, Roman Polanski, he wasn't even at the house. He was making a movie somewhere. He was far more famous than she was. She just did Valley of the Dolls and some cheapy Roger Corman type movies. But because she was an actress, and the crime was just so horrifying for the time. Hippies was the giant culture of the time. Everything was about the hippies taking over. And a lot of people didn't like hippies. I mean, our parents and the older generation thought they were just dirty, drugged up. Everything bad about the stinky, dirty, drugged up hippies all came to a head with Charles Manson, when it was a hippie family on drugs that killed our celebrities, our queens and beacons of society. So that fed into everybody's fears, and it was so huge, and it's such a huge story that hits so many elements. It'll last forever. It'll be TV shows. Law and Order had a couple of Manson types in episodes. It just keeps being recycled.
Yeah. Well, again, another great conversation and another great book. Charles Manson's Life Behind Bars, Taming the Beast. We've got Dary Matera. Thanks very much for being on the show.
Thank you. See you next time for one of my other books.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of the Z-Talk Radio Network.
I'll be back.